The day the galaxy learned fear, the Seventh Fleet died in silence. Thousands of warships hung above Nerex Prime, their formations precise, elegant, and utterly predictable. For 3 centuries, the Galactic Concord had fought according to the laws of civilized conflict. Every maneuver had an approved response. Every battle followed established doctrine. Order brought stability. It also brought disaster. Admiral Elena Voss watched from the command deck of the human carrier Resolute as the battle unfolded across her tactical display. Blue icons marked the Concord fleet. Red icons marked the Carthax Dominion. At first, everything looked normal. Then the blue icons began disappearing. One after another. Entire squadrons vanished beneath concentrated enemy fire. The Carthax warships moved with brutal efficiency, striking exactly where the Concord commanders were expected to be. No evasive deviation? Elena asked. Her operations officer shook his head grimly. Admiral, they're maintaining formation. Elena clenched her jaw. The Seventh Fleet was following doctrine to the letter. The Carthax were exploiting every line of it. A cluster of heavy cruisers erupted into expanding clouds of plasma. Seconds later, a carrier group attempted a textbook withdrawal route. The enemy was already waiting. More icons disappeared. The casualty counter climbed so fast the system stopped announcing losses individually. Across the bridge, nobody spoke. There was nothing left to say. Within 20 minutes, the Seventh Fleet ceased to exist. The largest military force in the sector had been erased. Elena stared at the empty section of space on her display. 3 years ago, the war had begun with confidence. Now entire fleets were being sacrificed for minutes of delay. Prepare my shuttle, she said quietly. Destination? The emergency summit. The journey to the Concord capital took 14 hours through jump corridors. When Elena arrived, the atmosphere inside the council chamber felt like a funeral. Representatives from dozens of species occupied elevated platforms surrounding a massive circular table. Some appeared exhausted. Others looked frightened. None looked hopeful. At the center of the chamber floated a holographic map of the war. Red territories spread across the Orion Arm like a disease. Another system flashed and changed color. The Carthax had taken it while the meeting was in progress. A murmur spread through the chamber. Counselor the Rix of the Valari adjusted his translator collar. Current projections indicate the loss of 23 additional systems within 6 months. Assuming resistance continues, another delegate added. A third representative spoke bluntly. We should discuss surrender. The word struck the room like a weapon. Elena rose immediately. No. Several heads turned toward her. The Dominion has broken every defensive line we've built, a delegate argued. What alternative remains? Elena stepped toward the central projection. The problem isn't our ships. She pointed toward a sequence of recent defeats. It's our thinking. The room fell quiet. We keep responding exactly as they expect. Every battle. Every operation. Every retreat. We follow rules written during centuries of peace and act surprised when an enemy uses them against us. A reptilian ambassador narrowed his eyes. The laws of civilized conflict protect galactic stability. They protected it when everyone followed them, Elena replied. The Carthax don't. Murmurs spread again. Counselor the Rix folded his arms. Are you suggesting we abandon the principles that built this civilization? I'm suggesting those principles won't matter if civilization collapses. The statement lingered in the air. For a brief moment, nobody answered. Then the objections came. Too dangerous. Too reckless. Too unpredictable. The discussion continued for hours. Nothing changed. By the end of the summit, the Council approved another defensive operation based on established doctrine. Elena already knew how it would end. 3 days later, she received confirmation. The rescue fleet sent to evacuate civilians from Tirani's station had been intercepted and destroyed. Exactly as predicted. The official report called the mission a noble sacrifice. Elena called it avoidable. That evening she sat alone in her quarters aboard the Resolute. A personal transmission appeared on her screen. Her brother's face materialized. Older than she remembered. Tired. Behind him, workers hurried through a crowded colony terminal. "You heard?" he asked. Elena nodded. His colony sat directly behind the next projected invasion route. For a moment neither spoke. Finally, he forced a smile. "You always were the smart one." "Don't. I'm serious." He leaned closer. "Whatever happens, figure something out." The transmission ended shortly afterward. Elena remained seated long after the screen went dark. Hours later, she entered a secure conference room aboard the ship. 6 senior human officers waited inside. The door sealed behind her. No aides. No recordings. No politicians. Only soldiers. Colonel Marcus Hale broke the silence first. "The council rejected everything?" "Yes." A few officers exchanged frustrated looks. Then Hale asked the question hanging over the room. "What happens if we stop playing by their rules?" Nobody answered immediately. Elena looked around the table. At the tired faces. At the people who had watched humanity lose colony after colony. At officers who understood exactly how close extinction had become. Outside the viewport, distant stars burned against the darkness. For the first time since the war began, Elena found herself considering an idea that would have been unthinkable only months earlier. Maybe the rules were no longer protecting anyone. Maybe they were the reason humanity was losing. And if that was true, something fundamental was about to change. The first broken rule. The decision was made 3 days later. Not by a vote. Not through a council resolution. And certainly not with permission. Admiral Elena Voss stood inside a secure briefing room aboard the Resolute while a holographic star map rotated above the table. Around her sat the highest-ranking officers in Human Strategic Command. Every face in the room carried the same expression. They knew exactly what they were about to do. Colonel Marcus Hale broke the silence. "If this fails, the Concord will blame us." "If we do nothing," Elena replied, "there won't be a Concord left to complain." Nobody argued. The target system appeared in the center of the display. Varkish Corridor. A critical transit route recently seized by the Carthax. Their battle groups stationed their controlled access to 3 occupied sectors. A direct assault would be suicide. Which was precisely why Elena had no intention of launching one. Operation Ghost Signal begins in 6 hours. Several officers exchanged looks. The plan sounded insane. That was the point. Human intelligence teams had spent weeks studying Carthax communication protocols. Their analysts discovered something interesting. The Dominion trusted data completely. If information entered their command network through verified channels, it was treated as fact. No one questioned it. No one expected deception. Centuries of rigid military culture had made the idea almost unthinkable. Humanity intended to exploit that weakness. The operation began with a single transmission. Then another. Then 1,000 more. False fleet signatures appeared across nearby systems. Fabricated logistics requests flooded monitoring stations. Distress calls suggested entire human task forces were preparing a major offensive near the Carthax border. Each piece of intelligence reinforced the next. A carefully crafted web. By the second day, enemy sensors reported dozens of human fleets that didn't exist. By the third, Carthax commanders were redeploying ships to counter a threat that had never been real. Inside the Resolute's command center, officers watched the reports arrive. "They're moving," an analyst said. Elena studied the display. Entire squadrons were leaving Varkish Corridor. Then another group. Then another. The heavily defended sector slowly emptied itself. Colonel Hale shook his head in disbelief. They actually bought it. They bought certainty, Elena corrected. Hours later, real human fleets entered the region. This time there was almost no resistance. Occupation forces were overwhelmed. Supply depots fell intact. Prison camps were liberated. Civilian transports escaped before enemy reinforcements could return. For the first time in years, humanity achieved a meaningful victory. Without a major battle. Without enormous losses. Without following a single approved doctrine. Celebrations spread across liberated settlements. The Galactic Concord had a very different reaction. The emergency summons arrived the next morning. Elena appeared before the council through secure holographic link. Counselor the Ricks looked furious. You deliberately manipulated military intelligence. Correct. You falsified battlefield information. Also correct. Several delegates erupted simultaneously. The chamber filled with accusations. Dishonorable. Dangerous. Irresponsible. Elena waited until the noise subsided. Then she spoke. How many civilians were evacuated from Varkesh? Silence. How many ships did we lose? Nobody answered. Because everyone knew the numbers. Very few. Far fewer than any conventional operation. Counselor the Ricks glared at her. That does not justify violating established law. No, Elena said calmly. The lives saved do. The meeting ended badly. Humanity received formal condemnation. No sanctions followed. The results were impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, thousands of light-years away, another individual reviewed the same reports. Supreme Strategist Zalcor stood inside the Dominion's Central War Complex. Towering screens displayed battle summaries. Casualty projections. Fleet deployments. Everything fit established models. Except one incident. Varkesh. He studied the data in silence. A subordinate approached cautiously. Our investigators believe the humans manufactured the intelligence. Zalcor folded his arms. A desperate trick. Should we consider them a significant threat? The strategist considered the question. Human forces remain smaller. Weaker. Outnumbered. By every measurable standard, they posed little danger. Yet something bothered him. The operation had no precedent. No logical military doctrine supported it. The humans had acted unpredictably. That alone made them unusual. Continue observation, Zalcor said. Nothing more? Not yet. The officer bowed and departed. Zalcor returned his attention to the reports. For the first time, he found himself curious. Back on the frontier, human strategic command pressed its advantage. New operations followed. Small raids struck supply convoys. False broadcasts redirected patrol groups. Decoy fleets appeared where none existed. The Carthax found themselves responding to shadows. Progress was slow but measurable. For every system lost, another was recovered. For every advance, the enemy now paid a price. Yet success brought its own burden. Late one evening, Elena stood alone in her quarters. Victory reports covered her desk. So did casualty lists. Though far smaller than before, names still filled the pages. Lives remained the cost of every decision. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. A message from her brother. Only one sentence. Keep going. Elena stared at the words for a long moment. Then she closed the screen. Across the galaxy, the war was changing. Not because humanity had developed superior weapons. Not because their fleets had grown larger. They had simply abandoned the assumption that war must be fought a certain way. And somewhere inside the Dominion's command network, an uneasy realization was beginning to form. The humans were no longer behaving predictably. For an enemy built on certainty, that might prove far more dangerous than any fleet. The War of Imagination. 6 months changed the shape of the war. The Carthax Dominion was still advancing, but no longer with the unstoppable momentum that had terrified the galaxy. Every new offensive encountered obstacles that shouldn't have existed. Supply routes vanished. Fuel depots exploded. Patrol groups chased phantom fleets across empty systems. For the first time since the invasion began, uncertainty had entered the battlefield. And uncertainty favored humanity. Admiral Elena Voss stood inside Strategic Command as reports streamed across a wall-sized display. System Ardent secured. Convoy recovered. Enemy reinforcement delayed 36 hours. One success followed another. Not because human fleets were stronger. Because they had become impossible to predict. A young lieutenant approached her station. "Admiral, the operation at Helios Gate succeeded." Elena glanced at the report. A human engineering crew had disguised cargo freighters as damaged civilian vessels. When a Carthax patrol moved in to inspect them, hidden strike craft emerged from concealed bays and disabled the enemy ships before they could raise an alarm. She smiled slightly. "Who came up with that?" "A maintenance technician." The lieutenant looked amused. "He originally suggested it as a joke." "Promote him." Across the galaxy, similar stories unfolded daily. Pilots modified sensors without authorization. Engineers repurposed mining equipment into defensive platforms. Civilian programmers developed software that confused enemy targeting systems. Innovation spread faster than orders ever could. Meanwhile, on the Dominion capital world, Supreme Strategist Zalcor searched for answers. Ancient human history filled the screens surrounding him. Wars dating back thousands of years. Insurgencies. Rebellions. Campaigns fought under impossible conditions. The more he studied, the less comfortable he became. A senior analyst entered the chamber. "You requested a summary." Zalcor gestured for him to continue. The analyst hesitated. "The pattern is consistent. Humans repeatedly adapt to unfavorable situations. Every species adapts. Not like this." The analyst enlarged several historical records. When facing superior forces, they alter tactics. More records appeared. When resources become limited, they improvise. Another series followed. When plans fail, they create new ones immediately. Zalcor stared at the data. Humanity treated flexibility as a strength. Most civilizations viewed it as a symptom of poor preparation. Suddenly, many recent defeats made sense. The Dominion expected enemies to follow doctrine. Humans treated doctrine as a suggestion. Back aboard the Resolute, Elena introduced a policy that shocked even her own officers. Every fleet commander would receive greater operational freedom. Central Command would provide objectives. Execution would be left to local judgment. Several admirals objected. "That creates inconsistency," one warned. "It creates opportunity," Elena replied. "What if they make mistakes?" She folded her arms. "They already do. The difference is they'll make their own mistakes instead of repeating mine." The policy transformed the front. Junior officers began making decisions without waiting for approval from distant headquarters. Small victories multiplied. Enemy advances slowed further. Entire sectors stabilized. But success carried a cost. One evening, Elena attended a memorial aboard a hospital ship. Rows of empty chairs represented those who would never return. Among the names was Commander Sarachin. A longtime friend. One of the first officers to support Operation Ghost Signal. Elena stood silently as the ceremony concluded. War had become numbers on reports. Until moments like this. Then the numbers regained faces. Later that night, Colonel Hale joined her in the observation deck. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Hale broke the silence. "We're winning." Elena looked out at the stars. "Are we?" "The front is holding. We're still burying people." Hale nodded slowly. "That's true." For a moment, neither had an answer. The next crisis arrived 2 weeks later. Carthax forces launched a massive counteroffensive near the Shattered Expanse, a region filled with unstable stellar debris and gravitational distortions. Unlike previous attacks, this one carried Zalkor's personal signature. He had adapted. Human patrols were driven back. Supply lines came under pressure. Several systems were lost within days. The war's balance suddenly felt fragile again. Emergency meetings filled strategic command. Officers debated options around the clock. Then intelligence delivered troubling news. The Dominion was assembling its largest fleet yet. Thousands of warships. Enough firepower to break through the frontier entirely. A briefing room fell silent as the projections appeared. Colonel Hale looked toward Elena. If they punch through there. We know, she said quietly. The route beyond the frontier led toward humanity's core territories. Toward Earth. Toward every major colony. Toward everything they were fighting to protect. For the first time in months, the room felt heavy with uncertainty. Elena studied the incoming reports. The war was approaching its decisive moment. Every battle before this had merely shaped the board. Now the real contest was beginning. Somewhere beyond the frontier, Zalkor was preparing his final move. And for the first time, both commanders understood exactly what kind of enemy they faced. The coming confrontation would not be decided by numbers. It would be decided by which side could adapt faster when the unexpected arrived. The last rule. The Shattered Expanse burned like a broken mirror across space. Debris fields stretched for light years, bending sensors and swallowing signals. Into that chaos, the largest fleet engagement in recorded history unfolded. Carthax warships emerged in disciplined waves, too many to count, too coordinated to ignore. Their formation doctrine was perfect. Predictable. Relentless. Across from them, the Concord defense line looked fragile. And at its center floated Admiral Elena Voss aboard the Resolute. A tactical officer whispered, "Enemy density exceeds projection by 40%. Colonel Marcus Hale replied, "They're not here to probe. They're here to end it." Elena didn't look away from the display. Then we don't give them a target to end. The first impact came without warning. Carthax artillery tore through outer screening fleets. 3 Concord cruisers vanished in seconds. Defensive formations attempted restructuring, but the enemy advance was already inside their decision window. The line collapsed step by step. A young comms officer's voice cracked. "Admiral, Sector Sigma is breaking." Elena finally turned. "Transmit fleet-wide directive, no fixed formations. No static defense grids." Hale frowned sharply. "That breaks every remaining Concord protocol." She met his gaze. "Protocols are why we're losing." The order went out. For a brief moment, confusion spread across Allied fleets. Then something unusual happened. They stopped waiting for permission. Human captains adjusted independently. Some pulled back. Others surged forward. A few feigned retreat only to reappear from blind angles created by debris fields. The battlefield stopped behaving like a map. It became fluid. On the Dominion flagship, Supreme Strategist Zalkor watched the shift unfold in silence. "They are fragmenting," his aide reported. "No," Zalkor said quietly. "They are decentralizing." He leaned closer to the display. Human behavior no longer followed recognizable fleet doctrine. Each engagement branch diverged unpredictably. A system-wide algorithm attempted prediction. It failed. For the first time in his career, Zalkor removed it from active use. "This is not chaos," he murmured. "It is distributed intent." Back in the Expanse, Elena received casualty updates in real time. Losses were still heavy. But so were enemy losses. A message arrived from Captain Rell of the 9th Strike Group. "We're improvising per local conditions. It's working. Request permission to continue ignoring standard engagement protocol." Elena replied instantly. "Permission granted. All fleets, same directive." Hale looked uneasy. If we lose control of coordination. We never had control, she cut in. We had structure. That's different. The turning point came when Carfax Command attempted a decisive strike. 5 battlegroups converged on the central Concord position, aiming to crush the command structure directly. Zalcor expected collapse. Instead, they found resistance that did not exist in any predicted formation. Repair vessels repositioned as decoys. Supply ships broadcast false command signatures. Civilian evacuation craft jammed targeting systems with self-generated interference. And every human fleet responded differently, yet toward the same objective, survival of the line. The Carfax strike stalled. Then fractured. Then scattered. Zalcor's aide hesitated. Their coordination is inconsistent, yet effective. He did not respond immediately. For the first time, frustration replaced calculation. They are not reacting, Zalcor said slowly. They are deciding. Across the battlefield, Elena observed the same shift. The Dominion fleet, once flawless in execution, now hesitated. Their rigidity had become visible. Inexploitable. Now, she said. No one asked what she meant. Every commander already understood. Human fleets surged forward, not as a single wave, but as thousands of independent actions converging by intent rather than order. A mining vessel rammed a Carfax destroyer after rerouting its mass drivers into kinetic amplifiers. A medical ship evacuated wounded while broadcasting false fleet signatures that drew enemy fire away from critical sectors. A damaged cruiser used its dying reactor pulse to collapse a debris field onto an advancing enemy line. None of it was planned centrally. All of it worked together anyway. On the Dominion flagship, alarms multiplied. Command synchronization failing, an officer reported. Re-establish structure, Zalcor ordered. It is already structured, the officer replied. Just not by us. Silence followed. Then the realization landed. Humanity had turned unpredictability into coordination. Not by eliminating chaos. By embracing it. The battle shifted irreversibly. Carfax formations began collapsing under their own response delays. Their doctrine required certainty. Every hesitation compounded into failure. Elena saw the opening. Final directive, she transmitted fleet-wide. No fixed endgame. Every unit completes mission objectives independently. Colonel Hale exhaled sharply. That's it, then. Yes, Elena said. That's all there ever was. Hours later, the expanse went quiet. Not from peace. From exhaustion. Carfax forces withdrew in fractured segments, unable to reconstruct command unity in real time. The Concord line remained standing, though scarred and scattered. On the Resolute, damage reports streamed in. Victory was confirmed. But no one celebrated immediately. Elena stood at the viewport as the debris field drifted silently. A final transmission arrived from Zalcor. It was not a threat. Not a warning. Just a single recorded message intercepted during withdrawal. I calculated every variable, his voice said. Except your refusal to remain constant. The transmission ended. Hale stepped beside Elena. So it's over? She watched the shattered expanse. No, she said quietly. It's understood now. Behind them, the galaxy remained uncertain. But for the first time in the war, certainty had not decided the outcome. Adaptation had.